Hi, I'm Kathryn Freese, and this is my presentation for Psychology 473, Advanced Biological Basis of Behavior. I'll be presenting on Dr. V.S. Ramachandran's book, Phantoms in the Brain, particularly Chapter 9, God and the Limbic System. And what got Dr. Ramachandran interested in the topic in the first place was an experiment done by Dr. Michael Persinger, in which he used transcranial magnetic stimulation to stimulate his own temporal lobe, and as he said, experienced God for the first time in his life. This finding fit well with the fairly well-known phenomena that patients with damage to the temporal lobe or temporal lobe epilepsy often experienced, grand religious or spiritual happenings during their seizures. So this made Dr. Ramachandran wonder if there's some sort of God module or center within the human brain, particularly in the temporal lobe. So what does religion have to do with humans? Why do we have religion? I'll start with a quote from Dr. Ramachandran's book. Many traits make us uniquely human, but none is more enigmatic than religion. Our propensity to believe in God or in some higher power that transcends mere appearances. Dr. Ramachandran puts forth several possible reasons for why religion exists, why we believe in God. Perhaps it's a consequence of our ability to contemplate our own mortality. Maybe it's our attempt to reconcile the dichotomy between the importance we feel our lives have to ourselves and others versus the relative insignificance we can tell we have in the cosmic scheme. Maybe it's an organizational method to help us form stronger groups and survive better. These are just a few of the many, many possible reasons. So some important anatomy and the associated physiology for what we'll be discussing is, of course, the temporal lobe, which lies right under your temple. Important roles of the temporal lobe are going to include memory, storage, and retrieval, and also its role in social interactions and relationships, such as facial and voice recognition. Getting a bit more specific, the limbic system and PAPES circuit, which are largely responsible, or at least considered responsible, for emotional expression. Excuse me. Much of the most important structures in these systems are found in the temporal lobe, such as the amygdala, which is the fear center in the brain, and the hippocampus, which is key for memory acquisition and storage. These systems, as I mentioned, are considered a central processing system that deals with events, memories, and emotions associated with these events and memories. It takes input from all sensory systems and gives output relating to the experience and expression of emotions. It's heavily interconnected with the frontal lobe, as we'll see in several of the studies I'm going to discuss, which makes sense if you think about the fact that emotions play a major role in a lot of the decisions we make, particularly our social interactions. Also tied to the hypothalamus and pituitary glands, which regulate our autonomic nervous system reactions. So current research on the topic, where are we now with how the brain relates to God and religion? I'd like to start with a study called Neural Correlates of Religious and Non-Religious Belief. And this looked at two groups of people, those who profess themselves to be religious and those who didn't. And they were presented with both religious and non-religious questions. The goal of the study was to find what parts of the brain were active when faced with a statement that people believed or didn't believe. And they found that a statement that a person believed mainly activated the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, but that this area was activated even more so with religious beliefs than with normal beliefs. So this, the VMPC is tied to self-representation, emotional associations, rewards, and goal-driven behavior. And more non-religious beliefs, like I believe the sky is blue, were tied to just straight memory retrieval. Which makes sense, again, if you think about it. Religion's going to be sort of a deeper, self-probing, emotional kind of experience. All right, next article, highly religious participants recruit areas of social cognition in personal prayer. And I found this to be a fascinating study. It looked at a group of people who profess themselves to be very devout, and it scanned their brains during periods of personal prayer as opposed to more formalized or ritualized prayer. So personal prayer would be sort of a spontaneous conversation with God, as opposed to maybe repeating a memorized prayer like the Lord's Prayer. And so the fMRIs showed activation in portions of the brain such as the temporal polar region, temporoparietal junction, precuneus, and of course the medial prefrontal cortex again, which are all key in governing interpersonal interactions. So this was showing us that believers who are praying, their brains are actually reacting as though they're having a conversation with a person they know who's sitting right there and talking with them. And I think that's a pretty powerful connection. So this next study, I think, is probably best explained if I read a passage from it. Religious experience and practice in humans are a consequence of the expansion of the dopamine-rich ventral brain systems that, in other mammalian species, mediate behavioral interactions with the most distant portions of the surrounding 3D space. Religion represents the extension of distant extrapersonal space and time into abstract and cosmic realms. For example, heaven and eternity, even as it relies on mammalian brain pathways that ordinarily oversee whole body, head, and oculomotor orienting and exploration in the distal portions of actual 3D space. So what this is saying is that the human brain, because it's developed so far beyond that of any other animals, has made use of parts of the brain that are usually used for experiencing and sensing, regions around our body, outside of our own body. And we've expanded that into something sort of beyond space and time, something much, much larger. Also, you'll notice it mentioned dopaminergic pathways, which we know are key in motivation, reward-seeking behavior, also motion, and that abnormalities in this neurotransmitter can lead to obsessive-compulsive disorder, schizophrenia, manic episodes, and temporal lobe epilepsy, all of which can be characterized by extreme religiosity. So this is another tie between this study and what we already know about the brain and religious experiences. So a little bit more about spirituality and religion in epilepsy. These seizures, or experiences during these seizures, can take many forms. They might be visual, auditory, they might be just a sense of premonition. They're very powerful. Note that these are going to be focal seizures in the limbic system, or at least that's what's hypothesized. So we're not talking about a grand mal seizure where the whole body, the motor seizures and the really horrible visible things, but this is going to be much more in the patient's head. And it's a difficult thing because a lot of these patients, their personalities are changed permanently by these experiences. There were a couple of patients in the book that Dr. Ramachandran mentions, and they're forever after completely consumed by their religion. And in fact, he does some studies with these patients, and he tests using their galvanic skin response and finds that they've basically become dulled to any other normally excitatory stimuli except religion. And so it's completely changed their body's normal responses, which is amazing and powerful, and not something to be thought of lightly. So one more just a very interesting study I'd like to touch on, questioning whether religion is a natural byproduct of the way the human mind works. And this first looked at children who tend to start life with a ready belief in the supernatural. And the study looked at children who didn't have any particular religious education or upbringing. And they tended to explain natural things as having a purpose, like, oh, that rock was put there so that the dog could scratch its back on it. And they also tended to have a pretty innate sense of a separation of mind and body. They watched a puppet show of a mouse and an alligator, and the alligator ate the mouse, which is a bit grim, but they were asked questions after the mouse got eaten. It's like, well, can the mouse walk anymore? And of course they said no. Can the mouse eat anymore? No. But then when they got to questions like, well, can the mouse think anymore? And does the mouse have memories? Can the mouse feel love? Pretty much across the board, the children answered yes. So this indicates that there's some sense of something beyond the corporeal body that children just have an innate sense of. And this continues into adults, though in a little bit different form. We tend to seek out patterns. We want to find higher meaning, some greater plan. And this is especially prevalent when we're under duress or feel like we're out of control in a situation. So in conclusion, this is not a subject we're likely to come to a conclusion on, at least anytime soon. Religion is a key aspect of humanity. We don't know if it's essentially cultural or biological. Maybe we'll figure it out in the future. There are certainly neurological pathways that play key roles in religious experience, such as the temporal lobe, specifically the limbic system, the ventral dopaminergic systems. And I think it's best perhaps to leave it with a view that Dr. Ramachandran expresses several times in his book, and that is that it's really not up to us to judge if someone's beliefs or experiences are right or wrong, and maybe to just we should be fascinated and appreciate the opportunity to learn. So thank you.